Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Empire Soccer Report. The international break is over. It's time for Red Bull football again, and I'm joined by the New York Red Bulls experience, Luca Richman. Saw you over the weekend catching some USMNT action in New York City. It's good to see you virtually now, Luca, but it was nice to see you in person too. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Yeah, we'll get into it. Weird international break for people who were at this watch party at Legends and other watch parties. Um, and I'm doing well. It's good to see the full World Cup field kind of fill out, all 48 teams. And as always, these breaks do feel kind of long, but getting back into MLS, it feels good.
Yeah, and of course, that's what this episode is primarily about. We're going to be talking about the Red Bulls, Red Bull New York, and their upcoming match on Saturday against FC Cincinnati. We're going to hear from Michael Bradley as well as Cade Cowell tomorrow in a virtual press conference. But let's talk a little bit international break, just because that's what is most recent. Apart from the United States' unpromising window of two losses, 7 goals conceded against some admittedly world powers in Belgium and Portugal, two teams that have never won a World Cup, but are, I would say, in the second tier of European top caliber nations. Humbled the United States. We saw some uh, upsets in European qualifying as well as in intercontinental or interconfederation qualifying, I should say. No real surprises there, but some great matches to speak of. Let's start with the U.S. just because that's what we were mentioning. That's where we saw each other on Saturday, Luca. First and foremost, they play a good first half against Belgium, play a good first half against Portugal. They end up losing both of those matches. They don't get to halftime with a lead in either case, though, and I think that's the biggest problem. They end up losing 5-2 to Belgium. The wheels completely fall off the wagon in the second half, and Portugal completely outclasses them in the second half on Tuesday night. Both games, of course, in Atlanta, Georgia. Yeah, we're not going to dive too deep into it because we did last week with Daniel Rebane. Shout out to Daniel Rebane of Various Sports Network. But Luca, I'll start just your overall impressions of what you saw from the U.S. this past window, and we'll go back and forth for a little bit here.
Yeah, it just feels really flat for me recently, and we have one more window before the real thing in June to kind of get things right. Um, but yeah, it's been really interesting to see. I think my main takeaway too, for the first game was just seeing Matt Turner in goal. I think was a surprise to a lot of fans, and then he puts up a 5-2 performance, and I think a lot of people were calling for Matt Freese. Matt Freese had a lot of, I think a bit of a better game in goal, but still obviously similar type of performance in a lot of ways. I think the biggest thing that I was really thinking of is it just feels so uncreative right now for from the US. It just feels like uh, the the attack is just really uninspiring. It's not that these players don't have any talent. Of course, I think that's what we've really said about this quote unquote golden generation. About this is the most talented group of footballers we've ever had. But it just feels like um, this team is just not connecting on any real meaningful level. Christian Pulisic, I believe he hasn't scored a goal for the USMNT since 2024,
Yep.
which is a crazy stat that I saw that I could not believe. And on the one hand, I think this is really motivating. I think to play back-to-back games against, arguably some of the favorites to be in obviously the knockout stages and possibly um, playing for third place or higher in the World Cup this year. I think it's something that we don't always see the USMNT playing these really high quality opponents, and I think it is a perfect wake up call. A lot of film to analyze. Um, I think it's I think it's honestly like, without being too overly optimistic, kind of, the rainstorm before the rainbow, so to speak.
Mm.
I think it will come together. It's mainly just coming down to, I think, these guys um really wanting to fight for something after they kind of felt this um, embarrassment in a way over the past few days. Um, I think it really lit the fire that they needed. The USMNT were on a hot streak heading into these games, and so I think it's brought them back down to reality. I think it's a good way for them to be humbled against top opposition. Um, and it's all about the response. One more break, and yeah, it's crazy to say that World Cup's only 2.5 months away, like 10 weeks away. So, um, yeah,
Yeah, I mean that
a
is
lot of
crazy.
rambling, but
No, no, you're right to say that we're closer to the World Cup. It snuck up on us, and now there's only one more window for the United States to figure things out on the field. But what we do know is that they'll have the squad finalized before that final window anyway.
right.
So, and I think you mentioned it with Matt Turner getting the start. That was a bit of a surprise. This was the last chance for a lot of players to make their case, at least not with their club form, but with how they played for the national team. I think that was Turner's last tryout to be the number one,
Hmm.
and I think he could have done better on the first goal in particular. I know Tim Ream kind of lunged out to deflect it, and
Hmm.
that maybe threw him off. But for me, that's a save he should be making. So I think Matt Freese comes in the second game against Portugal and doesn't make any glaring errors in the same sense, and he's got the job uh, as it stands right now. So I think he's going to remain the number one. And I don't think they performed particularly horribly in either of these two games, except
Hmm.
for the last. I would say not even the last, barring the last 10 minutes of the second half against Belgium. They were bad in the second half, and then they were bad in the second half against Portugal. They were good in each of the first halves, but they didn't take enough of their chances. McKennie, of course, scored the opening goal against Belgium. He's been in great form. That's great to see. Interesting to see what his role will be under Pochettino. I'm not sure he sees him as one of the double pivot players in central midfield. Maybe he'll be one of those half space players in and around Balogun and Christian Pulisic, but I thought he performed well. I thought individually you could look at certain players and say they did well, they didn't do well. But for me, it was clear that Pochettino was trying things out.
Yeah,
Turner
for
got the
sure.
start in the first match. Pulisic played as a striker in the second match. They bounced between formations. Tim Weah playing as an out and out right back, not really a wing back, which is, in my opinion, not exactly playing to his strengths. He had a bit of a handful marking Jeremy Doku in that
Hmm.
first game too. So some interesting decisions. I think Pochettino really thought this is my last chance to throw things at the wall and see what sticks. Maybe not the way I would have gone about it, but
Hmm.
I think that's a way you can kind of take a little bit of a breath when you look at those results. But that being said, I don't love that mentality, that attitude from the team going into the final stretch for the World Cup. But again, going into 2022, the U.S. lost to Japan and then drew to Saudi Arabia, and people were, slamming the alarm bells. And then they ended up doing all right in that group, drawing England, beating Iran, drawing Wales, and then ultimately getting humbled by the Netherlands in the knockout round. But that was the first go around for this group, so it felt like that was like kind of they met expectations, and that was good for a young group that didn't have a lot of experience playing top level talent on the international stage. Now for this group, I would have liked to have seen a jump or two. Feels like they wasted some time at the start of the second cycle in the lead into the Copa America, the whole drama with the Reynas and Greg Berhalter and all that. I think kind of slowed them down more than they would have liked. And yeah, you mentioned the star boy, Captain America, Christian Pulisic, hasn't scored since a Nations League quarterfinal against Jamaica in 2024. But you got to remember he wasn't a huge part of the team in 2025. Skipped out on the Gold Cup and the
Hmm.
window prior to that. So understanding all these caveats, it's still not enough. And I still think we left this window maybe some more questions than answers than we would have liked. I think it's starting to get a lot clearer who the 26 players could be. I think it's between 30 to 31 guys that could fit on that 26 man roster. Um, and I'm interested to see, obviously, a lot of people talking about the lack of minutes for Ricardo Pepi. I haven't seen enough people talking about the lack of minutes for Brendan Aronson. I thought that was criminal that he only got
Hmm.
11 minutes in this window, considering he's been playing pretty well for Leeds this past season. And I think he's a candidate to replace the likes of a Diego Luna in the squad. Um, but yeah, interesting things here and there. Tim Ream maybe falling off a little bit. Austin Trusty, Mark McKenzie, Alex Freeman going to sneak into a starting role. We'll see what it looks like. Some questions in central midfield too, but that's kind of where we're at with the U.S. because there's just so much we don't know. I think I would have liked to have seen more fight in that second half against Belgium. They need to be better on the details. The goals they concede against Portugal, individual mistakes on each of them. The first one, the poor giveaway in central midfield, and they don't track back well enough. The gaps are too wide in defense. And then the second goal is how much time did João Felix have to take that ball down and strike it? I don't think you could get away with that level of defending at Red Bull New York, let alone with the U.S. national team. So that's where I'll leave the U.S. But we had some great matches regardless in World Cup qualifying to fill out the final six places, the UEFA playoffs, as well as the Confederation playoffs. Excuse me, that is always a mouthful. I was gunning for Jamaica, was gunning for
Mhm.
Suriname. Jamaica fell
Mhm.
so short. They never looked for a second like they were going to win that game, though. And the
Mhm.
Congo DR rightfully goes through. Iraq, what an emotional game against Bolivia. Hats off
Yeah.
to Bolivia. They fought their hearts out, but Iraq goes through. That was so exciting, considering what that country's been through over the last 40 years. Awesome to see that they'll be at the World Cup. And then I'm going to bury the lead a little bit here. Czechia takes Denmark on penalties. Turkey beats Kosovo. Sweden, late drama in Stockholm to beat Poland. And it's the end of an international career, most likely, for Robert Lewandowski.
Yep.
Uh, and then three straight World Cups without the four-time champions of Italy. Bosnia and Herzegovina do it. And it's Esmir Baraktarevic. I hope I got that right. Who we've seen
Yeah, that
play
sounded
at Red
good.
Bull Arena when in his days with the New England Revolution. Now he's with PSV Eindhoven. Final nail in the coffin. He scores the final penalty. I mean, there's so many great storylines here just from these last few qualifiers. Um, would have been great to see Ireland and Italy at the World Cup, just thinking about what that could have meant for New York City, considering
Mhm.
what this show is about. But unfortunately, no, it's Bosnia over Italy. My mom's side of the family was very devastated about that, but it's more the same from the Italians and some more debutantes here. It's going to be really exciting to see teams that haven't been there for a while and teams that are making their first foray into this. Just what do you think of those last batch of qualifiers?
Yeah, I mean, seeing the celebrations obviously in Bosnia and Iraq come to mind too, but like it makes you love the fact that one, whatever you want to say about the World Cup being expanded for better or for worse, dilutes the competition, but ultimately giving these countries a chance, and as a neutral, just seeing, more of an underdog like Bosnia go through over Italy, someone who is Italian and also would have loved to see Italy back. Um, you have to feel for these fan bases and really respect what they're doing and obviously I watched that shootout, um caught the game leaving work, and yeah, just seeing Baraktarevic step up, I'm like, this is such a funny coincidence for us MLS sickos, to be confronted with the reality that this kid is knocking out Italy from their third consecutive World Cup, which is crazy. But yeah, I think it's made for such an entertaining and um nice little extra push for the momentum, um, for the hype for June. I think a lot of these countries. I mean, yeah, as you mentioned, DR Congo, Sweden, getting a dramatic late victory there with Gyökeres. Czechia too, obviously. I mean, these are just all experiences for these countries that, as a football fan, you can't not love seeing them go through. And um, it's as you said, heartbreaking goodbyes to guys like, Robert Lewandowski, and we've seen a lot of these stars. Obviously, it doesn't always translate to the national team, if they don't have the group around them to really really get it done. Um, but it feels good knowing we have all 48 teams locked in. We know that the USMNT will be playing Turkey along with Paraguay and Australia, and so that's something that um, we can kind of wrap our heads around, and hope we can get out of that group. It seems like a pretty forgiving group. I think really you'd have to maybe put it between the USMNT and Turkey or Paraguay to go through. It even kind of is.
I wouldn't count out Australia,
You
honestly.
wouldn't count out Australia, yeah. So I think in a way it's kind of like an even group in a lot of ways. Definitely
Yeah,
not a group of death by any means, but it's like, I mean, if the quality of the USMNT, that was on display this past weekend is the exact same in that group. I mean, I think it's really might be one of the most competitive groups.
I
Uh,
100%.
yeah. So I think it's definitely like a favorable group for the US, but like it's not necessarily um not competitive at all. I think it's going to be a really interesting mix. Um, yeah, I'm excited for it. I'm excited to kind of see the plan forward. Um, and yeah, just a nice little week of international break action. I feel like definitely one of the most memorable in recent history. So it's been fun to kind of go through it and wrap it up.
Yeah, and the last few things I'll say before we move on from the international talk, I believe I don't have the figure in front of me, but I believe the US's group in terms of average world ranking per
Hmm.
team is the second highest ranked group. So,
Oh yeah,
not
yeah,
a group of death, but certainly
yeah. Just
one that could finish any which way for those four teams. And I'll
yeah.
tell you what, I'm a little less confident about the US's chances than I was prior to this last window. Not that I
Mhm.
think that we should slam on the panic button just yet, but I wouldn't be shocked if it didn't go the US's way in a couple of those games.
Oh, absolutely not.
Australia will be tough. Paraguay will be tough. We saw that late in 2025. Turkey will be a good team. We saw that in June of last year. They played the U.S. off the park in the second half of that game as well. And I mean, you could say what you want about the U.S. lineup in that game, but the point is, it's three teams that the U.S. will have seen recently, should have a sense of what they're up against, and that's a good thing. But um, yeah, the mentality has got to be up a little bit from what we saw this last window for sure, and that's not so promising that we're talking about the mentality about the team 10 odd weeks away from the World Cup. And I do think that you know leading up to qualifying, you looked around the New York Red Bulls roster, or Red Bull New York roster, excuse me, and you thought there were a few candidates here who maybe could have gotten a chance to play at a World Cup. The Panamanians come to mind. Rafael Mosquera, Omar Valencia. Not so sure either of those guys are going to be in the plans for Panama moving forward. Prior to Costa Rica getting grouped in CONCACAF qualifying, Andy Rojas was up there. And of course, the captain, Emil Forsberg, was getting into the Sweden national team in 2025, came off the bench in a couple qualifiers, but um, they only won two qualifiers and they got through the playoff without him. I'm not sure he'll be there this summer either. So it could end up that no players from the Red Bulls end up going to the World Cup, and that would be a little bit disappointing. But regardless, it is what it is, and it's the greatest spectacle on earth for a reason, and we'll be watching no matter what. Um, Now, with that said, like you mentioned, a very exciting international break. I do think the parity of the groups, 48 teams. I hate the argument people are making. So Curacao and Haiti and Iraq and Jordan and Uzbekistan get to go to the World Cup, but no Italy and no Denmark. Well, I mean, Italy could have beaten Bosnia. They
Mhm.
could have not finished below Norway in their group, et cetera, et cetera. Denmark could have finished above Scotland. So these teams had their chances. 16 European teams are going. No European teams will play each other in the group stage. I love that. I'm kind of a fan of expanding the World Cup. Maybe there'll be a couple lopsided games. I wouldn't cut
Mhm.
out Haiti and Curacao. I think they'll sit deep and be organized and maybe nick a goal or two on the counterattack. Haiti probably more likely than Curacao, but um, that's just the way I see it. I'm a fan of the new format, and I think that it's the fact that it's a little more forgiving makes me rest a little bit easier for the U.S.'s chances, considering their group is tight. The Norway, Senegal, France, and who was the last team in that group? Norway, Senegal, France group. I'm forgetting, and Iraq. I think
Iraq, yeah.
that's the group of death for me. I think there's three teams in
Mhm.
there that all have a chance to make a deep run.
Yeah, 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 for
France,
sure.
Norway, Senegal, obviously, but um, regardless, that's the international break talk. Let's talk Red Bulls coming off of a 6-1 loss to Charlotte. Feels like a decade ago now. I think we all have tried to bury that from our brains, and I hope the players have as well. And now it's not getting any easier. They're still facing this uphill climb in terms of the severity in their schedule. Um, it was Charlotte last week, and it's going to be Cincinnati this coming week, and then after that, it's going to be Inter Miami away from home. Ooh, that's going to be a little bit scary. Cincinnati coming off of a wild 4-3 win over CF Montreal. Prior to that, they kind of tanked a game against the Revolution because they were in a CONCACAF Champions Cup tie. They lost 6-1, same score as the Red Bulls did to Charlotte. And then they, in dramatic fashion, blew it to Tigres in CONCACAF Champions Cup. I don't know if you watched that game, Luca. I stayed up for that one. That was crazy. They
Did
were
not catch
down.
it, but yeah, seeing
Oof,
all the just seeing the box score, it's like it's just the
insane.
classic MLS and CCC.
Classic MLS team going to Mexico for the
Yep.
second leg of a CONCACAF tie. They were up 3-0 after the first leg. You think there's no possible chance that they um, were going to find a way to lose. They go down 4-0. They're out of it. And then Kevin
Mhm.
Denke scores a pretty nice goal off of a header too. It's like the classic, just
Mhm.
get a goal on the road. And you think they're through, and they just ate so much pressure. 98th minute goal, and they are out of it. Um, all of the MLS teams go to Mexico in the second leg and really just bite the big one there, and they're all out now. At least the teams that had to go to Mexico for a second leg. So
Mhm.
other than that, Cincinnati, I think we've seen this before where teams who go on a CONCACAF Champions Cup run have a disadvantage in the season. They pick up injuries. The extra match congestion, excuse me, becomes an issue. No longer going to be the case for Cincinnati. They're going to be fully focused on MLS now. So they're going to come to Sports Illustrated Stadium on Saturday with nothing else on their minds. And I don't love what that means for Red Bull New York, considering the form that they've been in over the last few matches. Of course, we talked about the center back situation. Justin Che is going to be out. Dylan Nealis, we don't know. Maybe he's working his way back. But I imagine Volader and Parker are going to be the options if it's not Dylan Nealis available. And then Jaquil Marshall-Ruddy, who we saw get some time with the Canadian national team in their friendly last night. I think he'll be back at the right back position. Matty Dos Santos will be back on the left. And that's what the defense is going to look like. But they're going to have a tough task in front of them, having to deal with Evander and Jabari, and of course Kevin Denke, Luca. It's a tough Cincinnati team coming their way on Saturday.
Yeah, and firstly, I want to say, this is why we need more Leagues Cup games or in Mexico because of the, preparation that will provide for CCC. I mean, we saw just this is completely unrelated to the match on the weekend against Cincy, but we saw last or in 2024 after Daniel Edelman buried the most memorable penalty kick in recent history for the Red Bulls, sending them to the Eastern Conference semifinals, upsetting the Crew. He said, his penalty kick miss in Leagues Cup um, against why am I blanking on their name? Who did the team face in 2024 in Leagues Cup?
Um, I want to. They
Was it
beat
Montero?
Mazatlan,
No. No, 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 no. It was it'll come to me. But regardless, the team that he, missed his skied his penalty, I believe.
right?
Um it was motivation and it was an opportunity for him to learn in the middle of the year. He was that much more prepared when the playoffs came around. So if there is a silver lining to Leagues Cup for the Leagues Cup haters, it's more opportunity in lower stakes games to hone your craft, to mess up for, when it matters later on in, bigger stakes. Um, you're able to, you know, get it done. And so I think, that's one of the reasons why I'd love to see games in Mexico, just because like MLS teams need more regular experience going down there that isn't, in Champions Cup. Getting back to the Red Bulls, Cincinnati this weekend. Um, yeah, I think yeah, it's just going to be a question about the defense, honestly. It's and Michael Bradley can't do the same Gustav Berggren strategy as he'll be serving his red card suspension.
It's true.
So if if Dylan Nealis is not back, we'll see if he has to start Tim Parker, which is something that has so far been something he's averse to do. Um, yeah, as you mentioned, the uphill battle is really starting. I think, after the first two games, after you get a result in Orlando, get a result against New England, you're like, all right, the next few games are also kind of must wins. We're playing against, uh, Montreal at home, going to Toronto. Hopefully, can snag a result there, which, of course, the team did. But really felt like the Montreal loss kind of showed a bit of a baseline of what this team can look like. And then obviously, yeah, Charlotte is just, just too much experimentation kind of um yeah, resulted in the worst Red Bulls loss since, as I put it,
Yes.
admittedly very exaggerated, the worst loss since the 1900s, which is, just was a funny thing I did for people to comment about that. But no, I mean, well, first of all, also when you think about that, the fact that the club has not lost by 5 goals in 27 years, like you'd think there'd be the one in there with the amount of Metro heartbreak that has happened. But there's technically not been a loss that big since 1999, which is kind of crazy. But honestly, could not have come at a better time in a way. You get to sit with this loss for 2 weeks. You get to mill over it. You get to be hungry to prove yourself on the pitch again. Um, you know, I think you're already starting to see Bradley out comments and things like that, which is, way too premature in my opinion.
It won't
Um,
happen either.
it won't happen exactly. This is the time you need to be experimenting. Um, I don't necessarily agree with, playing a natural six as a center back in his first start of the season in terms of the lengths of the experimentation. But I do appreciate a willingness to try things out. I think that was something that we really saw in 2025 with Sandro Schwartz was um, not much innovation and creativity and kind of bringing out the same group of guys, same type of subs. Whereas it feels like in 2026, we're only 5 games into the season and feels like we've lived through five different, um, types of games in a way. And I think that's something that naturally just feels really weird and a lot of growing pains, but um, you need to be figuring out these things now if you're a young coach like Michael Bradley, inheriting the squad that he did, of course, bringing in his guys from Red Bulls too. Um, this is still something that I think will be a project that is, could even this experimentation could even last as long as until the World Cup break, come the end of May um, when the basically 2 month pause begins. Um, but against Cincinnati, I'd really love to see because we know the defense is going to be kind of a question mark. I'd just love to see a lot more production from the wingers. I mean, we've really seen Ruvalcaba and Cowell be kind of dangerous in terms of moving the ball forward. But there really is not much synergy between them. Um, and Forsberg behind them on the left and um, Donkor obviously on the right. Um, Julian Hall still proved that, he's able to nag a goal in, the 6-1 loss to Charlotte, but would love to see maybe some minutes from Choupo-Moting to start the game, and just mix it up a bit. I think I'd love to see a bit more of interplay with the wingers in the midfield, and maybe you could add more color to that. But just thinking about how it's felt kind of flat in the final third. I think the team is yet to really unlock Ruvalcaba and Cowell. Um, I think this break is kind of what the Red Bulls needed. Um, and to be at home against Cincinnati, as you said. they're fully focused on MLS now, kind of a dangerous thing. Um, I think it's going to be a good way to get back into the groove. Because the schedule does heat up in April. First midweek game is coming up um, on the 22nd versus DC, and also another thing to be mindful of too is the Red Bulls Open Cup draw is coming out tomorrow morning for the round of 32. So the schedule is definitely getting a bit congested, and um, first 5 games were kind of to figure things out. Now is really time for the momentum to kick in to start building up some points before the World Cup break at the end of May.
Yeah, by the time this episode comes out, I imagine the draw will already have been released. We are recording
Yep.
this on Wednesday. Um, you mentioned it's a good time for a break for the Red Bulls. I completely agree. I can think of one player who will have appreciated the break, and that's Emil Forsberg, who has played every second so far to this
Hmm.
point of the
Hmm.
season. I don't know if that's the best recipe for success when your aging superstar is relied upon to play every minute of every game. And we haven't, outside of the first match against Orlando, we haven't really seen him find his way into the score sheet so much. Um, so yeah, I think that's one thing to keep our eyes on. And if there's good news to be facing Cincinnati, yes, they did concede 6 goals to the New England Revolution, and New England's only win of the season, but they also, like the Red Bulls, have conceded 11 goals to this point. So if the Red Bulls, their wingers especially, need some confidence onto being able to create things, they've got a somewhat vulnerable defense in front of them. And I think Roman Celentano will still be unavailable. He was with the U.S. national team in camp and then had to leave the camp. So it might be old friend of Red Bulls too, Evan Loro in
Hmm.
goal for FC Cincinnati, which would be fun to see him at Sports Illustrated Stadium again. And you mentioned the ability for the midfield to connect with the forwards. It's something that eluded them, I would say, in each of their last 2 matches, especially in the second half against Charlotte. They were just getting torn apart, possession after possession. Every time Charlotte had the
Hmm.
ball, their midfield managed to power through. And you look at um, Cincinnati's midfield, and depending on how they like to start it, there's a couple of different players that can hurt you in there, namely Evander in the attacking midfield role, Pavel Bucha, um, Obina Nwobodo, who I think has been one of the better sixes for a long time in MLS. But then you also have Samuel Guidi, young player who has forced his way into that team and has been dangerous. So if the Red Bulls midfield is not up for the task, Audrey Mehmeti, Ronald Donkor, and Emil Forsberg, then I think that they could have their work cut out for them in that part of the pitch. And that's not to say anything of the wingers who, like you said, Luca, have been somewhat dangerous. They've created half chances here and there, but they just haven't looked like scoring since Cowell hit the crossbar in the first
Yeah.
half against Orlando. So that's 4.5 matches where those guys haven't looked so
Yeah,
dangerous.
and I
And if
think I think
yeah,
Rubalcaba had one woodwork hit as well in
against New England,
that was New England. Okay, yeah.
yeah, and um, that's us being nitpicky, right? Like
Yeah.
about the positives. And if you're thinking, is there going to be help coming there? We saw Sofo got one start when Cade Cowell welcomed the birth of his newborn child. Um, Cam Harper got his first minutes with Red Bulls 2. I was able to
Yep.
speak with him over the weekend, actually. It's going to be
Oh,
some
nice.
more time before he's fully back in match fit, before he's fully match fit. Um, he's a player who I think could really thrive under Michael Bradley's system, and I'm keen to see what he's able to do when he is fit and when he does get that chance. And he can play in multiple roles too, right? We've seen him as a winger, we've seen him as a fullback, we've seen him as a wingback, classic wide player, can do damage in a lot of different ways. I think he's a player who could, be a candidate to step into the starting 11 if things continue in this
Mhm.
direction for the Red Bulls. But that's space where Cincinnati are going to be vulnerable because they play with those super attacking winbacks and Echenique and blanking Brian Ramirez. So that's a chance if those guys get forward, the wingers have space to do some damage. That said, Alvis Powell, Matt Miazga, Miles Robinson, Nick Hagland, that's some quality players who play in that back three for Cincinnati who can make a difference. regardless, I like the idea of starting Choupo-Moting. Um, I do think Julian Hall has warranted the start. He scored 4 goals. That leads the team. It's towards the top of MLS to this point, and he's earned a start. But Choupo-Moting could be a start up the middle, and Hall could play on one of the wings. So we'll
Hmm.
see how Michael Bradley approaches this match. I'm just going to throw out a potential starting lineup for each team, just because I always do. I think it's going to be Evan Loro in goal. I think the back three. I don't think we're going to see a change from Cincinnati in their last match. Powell, Miazga, Robinson across the back, Echenique, Ramirez, the wingbacks, Bucha and Nwobodo in central midfield, and then Evander going to be the number 10, have the opportunities to float and really cause damage there. And then Kevin Denke up top alongside Ayoub Jabari, the Moroccan international. That's a really strong team. And I think the Red Bulls are going to counter it with Ethan Horvath in goal, Jaquil Martirelli at right back, Matty Dos Santos on the left. We'll wait and see about Dylan Nealis. For now, I'm going to assume that he is available. Volader and Nealis in the center defense, Mehmeti the 6, Forsberg and Donkor the 8s in front of him. And I think Bradley, we've seen him really want to stick to his guns. So I think we will see the same front three: Cowell, Hall, Ruvalcaba from right to left there. Um, yeah, are there any other changes you would make to that, Luca, based on what I've said, or do you think that Michael Bradley is going to be true to his system to this point?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I agree with you that it'll be pretty true to the system. Um, but also would not be surprised if there's anything else that he kind of switches up. Um, I think on the point of Chubo again, I know the system is 1-6 and 2-8s, but I think we really saw Chupo really thrive as you know kind of a bit of a I don't know if you could call it really a false nine or like more of a hold up striker. But I'm trying to think if there's really a way to unlock that part of his game in addition to having Julian Hall in the field. I don't really know necessarily where that would leave him. I don't think he's a like for like switch to be alongside Forsberg as an eight with Donkor. Um, but that's something that I've been thinking about recently in terms of some of the moments where I've really been impressed with Chupo's game is really his hold up play. And something that we didn't necessarily see from him too much um, in um, in his one start against Montreal, I believe. And so, yeah, I agree with the lineup. I think if Dylan Nealis is out, we'll really be curious to see if Parker is the guy Michael Bradley goes to, or if there's
I
some
mean,
other
who else?
solution. The jury's out on that one. Um, but ultimately, yeah, this really ideally should be the start of hopefully a run where the Red Bulls can try to pick up some points. They have another 2 game away stint after this game at home against Cincy. Also playing away at Cincinnati at the end of the month, so facing them twice in one month is something that's interesting for sure on the schedule. Um, Uphill battle for sure. I mean, I think with all the opponents throughout the month, it's ideally you could call it a 10-point month, but even that might seem a little ambitious. Um, and another fixture too, away in Montreal. So, we're getting the home and away for these teams in quick succession for Montreal and Cincy. Maybe Ricky Carmona haunts the team again north of the border. I know I'm diving into a bit more of a month-long preview, but
Mhm.
this is just kind of the part of the year, especially with the World Cup changing the schedule, where it feels like things really start to kind of ramp up,
Yeah.
start to really see the identity of the team. Um, they're out of the honeymoon phase.
Yep.
They're seeing the effects of what one defensive injury really can do to this back line. Obviously, Julian Bazan has signed with the team. Is not yet with the team due to visa processes.
Where have we heard
Uh,
that before?
where we heard that before? I mean, up until this point, the offseason was mostly, um, you know, stress free with the domestic transfer strategy.
Right.
This really is like the one piece where it's like, we're back to how it used to be. I'd also love to see Masanka Bungi maybe like get some minutes just
Yeah,
to see
he's
what
yeah.
he's like. Like just a funny signing, a Red Bull Global signing that maybe New York didn't have much control over. But he's only here until June 30th, which really is he's only here until May 23rd because there are no MLS games after May 23rd. Um, so the team has this left back on the roster. I'd love to just see what he has in the tank. I think Matty Dos Santos, the shine has kind of worn off on a lot of parts of his game, and understandably, he's still very young, still so much to learn. I think he's been growing very nicely, but would maybe love to see an Omar Valencia start thrown in there. Obviously, we know what happened when he subbed on in Charlotte, but
Yep.
just trying to like mix it up in that way. For example, I'd love to see like a Valencia Masanka Bungi game, and see what that's like. So I think I'm not done with wanting to see some Michael Bradley experimentation, but it definitely just feels like defensively, this Red Bulls team, for the past 5, 6 years, it's always been the defense is one of the best in the league. The offense, leaves you wanting a lot more. Now it kind of seems like, in a way, it's the opposite, and it's kind of weird wrapping our heads around the defense being really up in the air any given week. So I think that's really going to be a key factor versus Cincinnati and every game moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I too would like to see some more experimentation from Michael Bradley. I don't think they've really figured out what this the best formula is for the squad, but it's a question of whether or not we will see that sort of experimentation. I feel like he's got a great idea of what he wants to see out of the team, how he likes to set the team up. And I think, not to get ahead of ourselves, but looking through the rest of the month, it doesn't get any easier, especially considering Miami's waiting next week in Miami. And you got to go to Montreal, which is somewhere the Red Bulls have always struggled. And then you play midweek against the DC United team that's doing fairly well. That's a rivalry game that you want to show your fans that you still care about. And then you got to go back to Cincinnati at the end of that week. It's a short week, so a lot here to unpack, and it's only going to get more difficult. And there's some uncertainty in the back. There's some uncertainty on the wings, and there's a lot of question marks. Things that they're going to have to piece together sooner rather than later. Because, like you said, this is the meat of the season now. They've gotten the honeymoon phase behind them. This is really like this is where it starts to pick up and really get difficult. So I do think that this month of April will be a good litmus test for what the rest of the season looks like. And yeah, I think it starts in a great way against Cincinnati, who admittedly the Red Bulls have done well against in MLS regular season matches. So we'll see if that continues on Saturday. Luca, give me a score prediction, and then we can get out of here.
Score prediction. Score prediction. 2-1 Cincinnati with a Barlow goal in there just to make it
Oh,
sweeter.
we didn't even mention him. I mean, if Carmona's going to score two, then how many is Barlow going to score?
I mean, he has been scoring in
He's been
Champions Cup.
scoring.
Does he have one or two in MLS?
I think he has at least one. I know he
Yeah.
has scored. I gotta pull that up now, just because that's
Yeah.
our guy. Tom Barlow, man, I can't believe he's still scoring goals like that.
He's actually performing better at Cincinnati than he was at Chicago.
Yes,
Which is fascinating to see.
he's got 3 Champions Cup goals, including one against Tigres in the first leg, and
Yep.
scored against Montreal last
Yeah.
week in MLS play.
Yeah.
So he's kicking it, man.
Tom
He's still
Barlow game
kicking it.
winner 90+5.
Oh, no, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Yeah, no, I've been falsely predicting goal fest because based on the way that this team has been constructed, you felt like they'd be more free flowing in the attack and more vulnerable in defense. But the games where the Red Bulls have looked best have been low scoring, and I think we're gonna get a 1-1 draw. I think I keep predicting the wingers to score. I'm not gonna do that, so maybe it will happen. I'll say Julian Hall gets another, and Evander is going to score as well for Cincy. But other than that, things are going to be mostly played between the lines in midfield. So, yeah, thanks again to Luca Richman of Red Bull New York Experience for hopping on the show. Thanks again for joining me, as always. Great to have you here. This has been Empire Soccer Report. The Red Bulls take on FC Cincinnati on Saturday, April the 4th at Sports Illustrated Stadium before they head out to face Inter Miami and Lionel Messi. next week. Thanks again for joining. So long.